Welcome to the Memory Room podcast. We know you're here because you want to go deeper than just the headlines. Maybe you're prepping for a big discussion, or maybe you just love digging into history like we do.
And today, we're really diving deep. We've got archival photos, transcripts, forensic reports, all focused on one thing, the RMS Titanic.
Yeah, it's more than just a famous disaster, isn't it? It's become
Yeah,
this massive symbol of, well, ambition, technology, maybe even hubris.
exactly. And behind the myth, there's this incredibly complex puzzle. Our goal today is to really unpack that using the sources, look at the mechanics, the human stories, the errors, figure out what really happened to the unsinkable ship.
Okay, let's jump in. Where does this story even begin? I guess with the ship itself, this incredible dream they were trying to build, hashtag I, forging the unsinkable dream, the ship in the times. So before the tragedy, there was just this behemoth. What was the thinking behind building something on the scale of the Titanic back in the early 1900s?
Well, it was all about making a statement. Engineering prowess, conquering the Atlantic, the sheer size is, frankly, still mind-boggling.
Give us the numbers again.
Okay, so you're looking at 882 feet and 9 inches long, 92 and a half feet wide, displacement around 66,000 tons. It was,
Right.
it was literally the largest moving object humans had ever created at that point.
Taller than an 11-story building if you stood it on end, right?
That's the one. And think about the manpower. Harlan and Wolff, the builders, had something like 14,000 workers on it at the peak. It was a monumental undertaking.
And it wasn't just about being big, was it? There was this rivalry with Cunard Line.
Right. Cunard had the faster ships like the Lusitania, Mauretania. They held the blue ribbon for speed. White Star Line couldn't really compete on speed, so they went for size and, crucially, luxury.
So the Olympic Titanic, Britannic, their whole selling point was comfort and grandeur.
Precisely. They wanted passengers to feel like they were in a top-tier hotel that just happened to float. Stability, luxury, minimizing the sensation of being at sea. That RMS designation Royal Mail steamer added to that feeling of reliability, of solidity.
Almost making you forget you were on the ocean at all.
That was the idea. Defeat the sea psychologically through sheer opulence and scale.
Which brings us straight to the passenger experience and the luxury in first class. It sounds almost mythical.
Oh, something else. They were directly competing with the grandest hotels in Europe. Take the swimming pool, that was a huge novelty.
Heated salt water, right, on F deck.
Yep, 6 feet deep. But even there you saw the social hierarchy, strictly first class only.
And wasn't there some weird timing rule?
Uh-huh. Men could swim for free between 6 and 9 a.m. Women, they had to
No.
pay a fee every single time they wanted a dip. Different rules for different folks, even in the pool.
Wow, okay, what else screamed luxury? The gymnasium.
Right, up on the boat deck, supervised by T.W. Macaulay, the physical educator, who sadly didn't make it. It had rowing machines, punching bags,
And the famous electric animals.
the electric camel and the electric horse. Can you imagine these sort of early mechanical exercise machines? It was like saying, we've even tamed exercise indoors while crossing the Atlantic.
It's pure theater, isn't it? And the dining.
Oh, the dining room. Massive. Seated 500 people. You're talking multi-course meals, lobster, caviar, the kind of food you'd expect in a palace.
And they even had a bugler announce dinner. Peter Fletcher.
That's right. Made it a real event. Plus, you had the first-class smoking room, very plush, very exclusive, and interestingly, a reading and writing room that apparently barely anyone used.
Why do you think that was?
Well, it suggests first class wasn't really about quiet contemplation. It was about being seen, socializing, dining, showing off your status.
Okay, so that's the glittering top tier. Let's contrast that with third class, or steerage.
Yeah.
What was life like down there?
Well, it's often portrayed as grim, but compared to other ships at the time, Titanic's third class was actually pretty good. A step up. They had proper cabins, not just open dorms. They had running water, electric lights, things that might have been second-class standards on other liners.
But they were still segregated, right? Tucked away.
Oh, absolutely. Location was key. Third-class areas were generally in the less desirable parts of the ship down low, near the noisy engines, subject to more vibration. Single men were way up in the bow, families often towards the stern, physically separate.
And these were mostly immigrants.
Overwhelmingly, we're talking over 700 people in third class, the vast majority heading to America to start a new life. That's the human core of this story, really.
And the tragic part is how that physical separation played out in the disaster.
It's brutal. The survival rate for third class was abysmal. Only about 25% made it off. That statistic tells you everything about how class structure impacted survival. It wasn't just about the ship sinking. It was about who had access to the escape routes.
A societal failure mirrored on the ship itself.
Precisely. It wasn't just a maritime accident. It was a reflection of the era's deep inequalities.
Okay, so the ship is steaming across the Atlantic, this microcosm of society, brimming with confidence, but also heading towards a series of, frankly, shocking errors. It starts with the speed, doesn't it?
It really does. Captain Edward J. Smith, hugely experienced, commodored the fleet. This was meant to be his final triumphant voyage before retiring. A celebrity captain, really.
But he kept the speed up, despite ice warnings.
Yeah, around 22 knots, near full speed. And this is after receiving at least 6 distinct warnings about ice fields ahead on that Sunday, April 14th. Some were pretty specific.
Why? If the ship's selling point was luxury, not speed, why push it through known danger?
It's hard to say for sure, but likely a combination of factors. Hubris, definitely. An unshakable belief in the ship's strength, the idea they could handle anything. Plus, maintaining schedule was important for prestige, for arriving in New York on time to fanfare. The British inquiry later zeroed in on that excessive speed.
And that confidence, or arrogance, was compounded by this almost unbelievable detail about the binoculars.
It sounds like something out of a novel, but it's true. There was a last-minute crew change just before sailing. Second Officer David Blair was reassigned.
And he pocketed the key.
Accidentally, yes. He walked off with the key to the locker in the crow's nest where the binoculars were kept. So the lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, had nothing but their own eyesight.
And they're way up there, 30 meters above the water, on a night that was famously calm and dark.
The worst possible conditions for spotting ice without optical aid. It was a moonless night. The sea was exceptionally calm, like glass. That meant no waves breaking against the base of the iceberg, no white water to give it away.
So the iceberg would just blend into the darkness.
Exactly. Especially a dark berg, or one that had recently rolled over. Without binoculars to pick up any faint glint or shape on the horizon, spotting it in time was, well, virtually impossible. They were relying purely on naked eye detection in near-perfect camouflage conditions.
Okay, so the lookouts are handicapped. But what about the radio room? They had the warnings, 6 of them.
They did. And some were very specific. Warnings from the Baltic, the America, the Nordam, and crucially, one from the Mesaba, which pinpointed a large field of ice very close to Titanic's position, maybe only 80 kilometers away.
So why didn't Captain Smith or the officers react? Slow down. Change course significantly.
This is where the Marconi wireless system becomes critical. The operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were employees of the Marconi Company, not directly White Star Line crew in the same way. And their priority? Well, it seems it was transmitting passengers' personal messages back to shore.
Sending telegrams was a business.
A lucrative one. They were buried under a backlog of these private messages. So when crucial ice warnings came in, they were sometimes treated as less urgent than the paying traffic. There's evidence some warnings might not have even reached the bridge or weren't given the priority they deserved.
And then comes the incident with the SS Californian, the ship that was closest.
Yeah, this is perhaps the most frustrating part. The Californian had stopped for the night because it was surrounded by the very ice field the Titanic was steaming towards. Its wireless operator, Cyril Evans, tried to warn the Titanic.
But Phillips was busy.
Extremely busy and apparently quite stressed. The Californian signal was very strong because they were so close, and it blasted into Phillips' ears while he was trying to send passenger messages via the powerful Cape Race station. Phillips' reaction was abrupt.
He told him to shut up.
Essentially, yes, shut up, I am busy, I am working Cape Race. Evans, feeling rebuffed and nearing the end of his shift anyway, simply switched off his set and went to bed.
Unbelievable. And the Californian was how far away?
Maybe 32 kilometers. Close enough that they saw Titanic's rockets later but misinterpreted them. Close enough that if their radio had been on, well, history might be very different. That one moment of irritation arguably sealed the fate of hundreds.
Do we even know what the iceberg looked like? There's a photograph, isn't there?
There is. Captain W. Wood of the SS Etonian took a photo 2 days earlier of a very large, distinctively shaped iceberg in that area. Later, survivors' descriptions and sketches seemed to match it quite closely.
But why was it so hard to see? Theories about it being dark.
Several possibilities. It could have been blue ice, very old, dense ice with no air bubbles making it less reflective. Or it might have picked up dark sediment or even volcanic ash. Another theory is that it had recently rolled over, exposing a darker underwater surface. Whatever the reason, against that black, glassy sea, it was a phantom until it was too late.
And then 11:40 p.m., The impact. Not a huge crash, according to many.
No, more of a glancing blow, a shudder, a vibration that some people barely noticed. First Officer William Murdoch, on watch at the time, ordered the ship hard a starboard, meaning turn the tiller to starboard, making the ship swing to port, and ordered the engines stopped, maybe even full astern.
Trying to avoid it completely.
Right, but that maneuver resulted in the iceberg scraping along the starboard side, below the waterline, for probably around 250 feet.
And this leads to that counterfactual argument. What if he'd hit it head-on?
It's a grim calculation, but the thinking is a head-on collision. While devastating to the bow, might have crumpled the first one or two compartments. The ship was designed to survive that. There was precedent. The SS Arizona hit an iceberg head-on in 1879, crushed its bow, but stayed afloat.
But the glancing blow opened up too many compartments.
That was the killer. It didn't concentrate the damage. It spread it along the hull's seams.
And the ship designer, Thomas Andrews, knew immediately what that meant.
He was on board, yes. Captain Smith took him down to assess the damage reports. Andrews understood the design intimately. He knew the ship could float with any two compartments flooded, even the first four. But the reports indicated water pouring into the first 5 compartments.
One too many.
One too many. Andrews reportedly told Smith the ship was mathematically doomed, giving it maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours at most. From that point on, it was just a matter of time. Less than 3 hours from impact to disappearance.
So the immediate cause was the iceberg, compounded by human error. But later analysis, especially after the wreck was found, revealed the ship itself had, well, hidden weaknesses. Let's talk about the watertight bulkheads. They were supposed to be a key safety feature.
They were the basis for the unsinkable claim, absolutely. 16 transverse bulkheads designed to contain flooding. But there was a critical design flaw or perhaps a compromise.
They didn't go high enough.
Exactly. They only extended up to E deck, maybe D deck in the bow section, which is roughly 10 feet, about 3 meters, above the waterline.
And why was that? Was it intentional?
It seems it was a deliberate design choice, likely linked to the desire for grand open spaces in first class on the decks above. Higher bulkheads would have divided those long, impressive, prominent decks and public rooms. Aesthetics and passenger convenience apparently trumped ultimate safety.
So when the bow started to go down,
The water filling the first few compartments reached the top of the bulkhead and simply spilled over into the next compartment. Then that one filled and spilled into the next and so on, like water overflowing an ice cube tray.
wow. So the very feature meant to compartmentalize the damage actually facilitated the flooding sequence because of that height limitation.
It became a cascade failure, a fatal flaw born from prioritizing interior design over engineering resilience.
And there's another potential hidden factor, the coal bunker fire theory.
Yes, this has gained traction thanks to research by journalist Sanan Maloney. He presented evidence, including photographs showing scorch marks on the hull before sailing, suggesting a fire had been burning spontaneously in one of the large coal bunkers, specifically bunker number 6, for possibly weeks before the voyage.
How serious could that have been?
Coal bunker fires weren't uncommon, but this one might have been particularly intense. The concern is that sustained high temperatures, potentially reaching 1,000 degrees Celsius, could have significantly weakened the steel of the hull and the bulkhead adjacent to that bunker.
And bunker 6 was right where the iceberg hit.
It appears to be in the precise area of the primary impact damage. So the theory goes the iceberg struck steel that was already compromised, making it fail more easily and exacerbating the damage. It's still debated, but it adds another potential layer to the technical failures.
Okay, but even beyond bulkheads and possible fires, modern science pointed to something even more fundamental, almost microscopic: the rivets.
This is fascinating stuff, revealed by analysis of metal fragments recovered from the wreck site. Metallurgists looked closely at the rivets used to hold the hull plates together.
3 million rivets in the ship, right?
About that, yes, hammered in by hand. Now, the hull needed different types of rivets. In the main central part of the ship, where the stresses were highest, they used high-quality number 4 grade wrought iron rivets. Strong, reliable stuff.
But not everywhere.
Not everywhere. In the sharply curved sections, particularly at the bow and the stern, construction was trickier. Access was harder for the hydraulic riveting machines. Evidence suggests that in these areas, they switched to a lower grade, cheaper number 3 wrought iron. And some riveting here might have been done by hand, which is less consistent.
What's the difference between number 3 and number 4 iron?
Quality and purity. The number 3 iron contains significantly higher levels of slag impurities left over from the manufacturing process. This slag makes the iron more brittle, especially.
In freezing cold water.
Exactly. Those impurities created weaknesses. When the immense pressure of the iceberg collision occurred in the icy North Atlantic water, the number 3 rivets didn't have the same ductility, the ability to deform under stress.
So instead of bending or stretching.
They snapped, they popped, the heads sheared off. Instead of the steel plates tearing, which might have happened with stronger rivets, the seams between the plates were forced open as the rivets failed sequentially.
Like a zipper opening up.
That's the analogy often used. It allowed water to flood in much faster and along a greater length of the hull than if the plates themselves had simply torn. It suggests a cost-cutting measure, or perhaps a supply issue with the higher-grade iron, led to a fundamental weakness at the point of impact. The ship's Achilles heel wasn't just the design, it was literally in the nuts and bolts, or rather, the rivets.
So the ship is failing technically, water pouring in, but the scale of the human loss wasn't just inevitable physics. It was massively amplified by decisions or indecisions about the lifeboats. Let's start with a simple fact. There weren't enough.
Not even close. And this is one of the biggest scandals. The regulations at the time, set by the British Board of Trade back in 1894, were based on ship tonnage, and they hadn't kept pace with how big ships had become.
So the Titanic actually met the legal requirement.
Technically, yes, and exceeded it slightly. The law required 16 lifeboats for a ship her size. Titanic carried 2016 standard wooden ones and 4 collapsible Engelhart boats, total capacity, 1,178 people.
But there were over 2,200 people on board.
Right. So even if every single seat in every lifeboat was filled perfectly, they only had space for about 53% of the people, just over half. It was a disaster waiting to happen purely based on those numbers.
And yet the horrifying part is that even those limited seats weren't all used. Hundreds went empty.
It's staggering. The final count suggests around 472 empty seats were lowered away in the lifeboats. Lifeboat number 7, the first one lowered, had capacity for 65 but left with only 28.
Why? Why lower boats half empty when people are doomed?
A combination of terrible factors. Firstly, chaos and poor crowd management on deck. Secondly, many passengers initially refused to believe the ship was actually sinking. They felt safer on the huge, brightly lit deck of the unsinkable Titanic than getting into a small boat being lowered into the dark, freezing ocean.
Hard to imagine that mindset now, but maybe understandable then.
And thirdly, there was apparently real concern among some crew members about the strength of the davits, the crane-like mechanisms used to lower the boats. They feared the davits might buckle under the weight of a fully loaded boat, so they deliberately lowered them partially full. Tragic caution.
Which leads to stories like Lifeboat 1, the so-called money boat.
Yes. Lifeboat 1 was notorious. Designed for 40, it left with only 12 people. Just 5 were passengers, all first class, including Sir Cosmo Duff Gordon and his wife, Lady Lucy Duff Gordon. The other 7 were crew members.
And the controversy was about them not going back.
Exactly. After the ship sank, the cries of hundreds of people in the water were audible, but Lifeboat 1 didn't return. Accusations flew later during the inquiries that Sir Cosmo had paid the crew members £5 each, a hefty sum, then effectively bribing them not to go back and risk being swamped by desperate swimmers.
Was that ever proven?
He was officially cleared of improper conduct by the British inquiry, but the nickname Moneyboat stuck. Whether it was bribery or just poor judgment under duress, the optics were terrible and highlighted the stark contrast between the few who escaped easily and the many left behind.
And the loading process itself was inconsistent, depending on which side of the ship you were on.
Massively inconsistent, and it cost lives. Second Officer Charles Lightoller was in charge of loading on the port side. He interpreted Captain Smith's order of women and children first, very strictly, often as women and children only.
Meaning, if no women or children were immediately present, the boat went down with empty seats.
That's what happened in several cases. Men were turned away even when there was space. Meanwhile, on the starboard side, First Officer William Murdoch seems to have interpreted the order more pragmatically. Women and children first, but if there were none waiting, he allowed men into the remaining seats.
So your chances literally depended on which side of the deck you happened to reach.
It seems so. That difference in interpretation directly impacted who got a seat and who didn't.
And all this brings us back to the devastating impact of class on survival. The statistics are just brutal.
They really lay it bare. You mentioned the overall third-class survival rate only 25%. Compare that to first class, where around 61% survived. Second class was about 42%. The hierarchy of the ship was grimly preserved in the water.
And for children, the disparity was even worse.
Heartbreakingly so. Almost all children in first and second class survived. But in third class, 52 out of the 79 children died, over two-thirds.
Why?
Yeah.
What physically stopped them from getting to the boats?
Several factors mentioned in survivor accounts and inquiries. Locked gates or barriers, intended to maintain class segregation even during normal sailing, may have blocked or slowed their access from the lower decks up to the boat deck.
They couldn't get up top.
Or it took them much longer. Plus, language barriers were a huge issue. Many third-class passengers were immigrants who didn't speak English well, or at all. They wouldn't have understood the shouted commands or known where to go in the confusion. They were often the last to know the real danger and had the furthest, most confusing route to the lifeboats.
There's a document, the Survivor Manifest, compiled on the rescue ship Carpathia, that gives a snapshot of this chaos, doesn't it?
It's a very poignant piece of evidence. Just a list of names, but you see notes scribbled next to them, names crossed out. Sometimes DOA, dead on arrival, for those pulled from the water alive, but who succumbed to hypothermia on the Carpathia. You see symbols indicating who was rescued from which boat, including the waterlogged, overturned collapsible B. It's a stark accounting of who made it and who didn't.
But amidst all this horror and failure, there were incredible acts of courage and moments of humanity.
Absolutely. You have to remember those too, like the story of Robert Douglas Spedden, the 6-year-old in first class.
His nurse told him they're going stargazing.
Yes, Elizabeth Burns, his nurse. Instead of panicking him, she woke him gently and said they were going on a little trip to see the stars. He fell back asleep and woke up safe in a lifeboat. Just shows remarkable presence of mind. Tragically, the boy himself died young in an unrelated accident a few years later.
And then there's the legend of Molly Brown.
Margaret Molly Brown, the unsinkable Molly Brown, though she apparently disliked the nickname. A wealthy Denver socialite traveling in first class. She ended up in lifeboat sex and became famous for her forceful personality.
She urged them to row, argued with the quartermaster.
That's the story. She reportedly clashed with quartermaster Robert Hitchens, who was in charge of the boat, urging him to distribute rowing duties, keep spirits up, and crucially, arguing they should go back to look for survivors. She really took charge, a force of nature in that little boat.
And acts of heroism from the crew, too. Officer Lowe going back.
5th Officer Harold Lowe. He was the only officer to command a lifeboat that went back into the debris field after the sinking. He gathered several lifeboats together, redistributed passengers to make space in his own boat, number 14, and then rowed back towards the cries.
How many did he rescue?
He managed to pull 4 men from the freezing water who were still alive. One of them, Fong Lang, was one of the few Chinese passengers who survived, found clinging to a piece of wreckage. It was a brave, dangerous act, going back into that field of death.
And, of course, the orchestra, playing until the end.
That image has become iconic, hasn't it? Wallace Hartley and his band. Accounts vary on exactly what they played last, but the consensus is they continued playing hymns on deck to try and calm passengers as the ship went down. They all perished. It's seen as this ultimate act of duty and selflessness.
The sinking itself was a global shock. But then the ship vanished beneath the waves, becoming almost a legend, lost for decades until 1985. Robert Ballard's expedition.
Finding the wreck 73 years later was a monumental event. At that incredible depth, 12,500 feet, nearly 2.5 miles down, using pioneering underwater technology.
And the discovery immediately confirmed something the official inquiries got wrong, didn't it?
Yes, it proved definitively that the ship had broken in two. The original inquiries, both British and American, concluded she sank intact. But Ballard found 2 main sections, the bow and the stern lying about 600 meters, nearly a third a mile apart on the seabed.
Why did it break apart?
The stresses became too much as the stern lifted high out of the water. The bow was full of water, pulling it down, while the stern was still buoyant, lifting up at a steep angle. The keel, the ship's backbone, simply couldn't take that strain and snapped somewhere near the midsection. This also helped explain why it sank relatively quickly after the final plunge began.
And the condition of the 2 sections is very different.
Dramatically different. The bow section is surprisingly well preserved, relatively speaking. It plowed into the seabed mud, which offered some support and slowed decay. You can still recognize its shape, features like the anchor chains.
But the stern.
The stern is a complete mess, a chaotic wreckage field. The thinking is that as it sank, it likely held huge pockets of trapped air. The immense water pressure as it descended caused catastrophic implosions and structural collapse. It basically disintegrated on the way down or upon impact.
And now even the wreck itself is disappearing.
Sadly, yes, it's being consumed. The primary culprit is a species of bacteria aptly named Halomonas titanicae. These microbes literally eat iron and steel.
Creating those rust formations.
Yasticle, exactly. They hang off the wreck like rusty icicles. Between the bacterial action, the deep-sea currents, the salt corrosion, and possibly some disturbance from salvage operations and tourist submersibles over the years, the wreck is deteriorating rapidly.
How long do experts think it has?
Predictions vary, but the consensus is that within a few more decades, the main structure could collapse entirely, leaving little more than a rust stain and scattered artifacts on the ocean floor. It's a race against time to document it.
But the Titanic's most important legacy isn't the wreck itself, it's how it changed maritime safety forever.
Absolutely. The sheer scale of the disaster, the loss of so many prominent people, the failure of this supposedly infallible technology, it shattered public confidence and forced governments to act.
Leading to solace.
The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea first convened in 1914 directly because of the Titanic. It was the first major international effort to standardize maritime safety regulations.
And what were the immediate big changes it brought in?
The most obvious one, the lifeboat requirement. SOLAS mandated that all passenger ships must carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board, actually, usually specified as 125% capacity to have some margin. No more half measures.
What else? Drills.
Yeah.
Ice warnings.
Mandatory lifeboat drills became standard practice, so passengers and crew actually knew what to do in an emergency. Something reportedly canceled on the Titanic that morning. And critically, the disaster led to the formation of the International Ice Patrol.
Run by the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yes, tasked specifically with monitoring the North Atlantic shipping lanes for icebergs, tracking them, and broadcasting warnings to all ships in the area. That system still operates today, a direct legacy.
And existing ships were modified too, like Titanic's sister, the Olympic.
Immediately, the Olympic was pulled from service and underwent a major refit. They raised the height of her watertight bulkheads significantly, extending them much further up. They also added an inner watertight skin, essentially creating a double hull along much of her length. They learned the hard lessons from Titanic very quickly.
So looking back at this whole deep dive,
Yeah.
it really was this perfect storm, wasn't it? A convergence of factors.
It truly was. You had the design hubris, the lowered bulkheads, you had the potential material failure with those brittle rivets, you had the human errors, the speed, the ignored warnings, the wireless mishap, the bungled lifeboat launch. Each one amplified the others.
The complexity itself created the vulnerability.
That's a great way to put it. It reminds us that even the most advanced systems can be brought down by unforeseen interactions, overlooked details, or simple human fallibility.
It's a sobering thought. The Titanic was the peak of its era's technology, yet it failed catastrophically. Today, we have incredible advancements, satellite navigation, advanced radar, much better ship design like double hulls.
We like to think we're much safer.
Right. But is, hypothetically, a modern vessel were to face its own perfect storm, a unique combination of some hidden material flaw, maybe a complex software glitch, human complacency, maybe even a regulatory loophole we haven't thought of. What do you think? What hidden vulnerability might be the Achilles heel of today's maritime technology? Something for you, our listener, to ponder.
That's a really interesting question to leave people with. It's been fascinating digging into these details. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope you found it valuable. We'll see you next time on the Memory Room Podcast.